her cussing right now.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. It's good to see all of you. I'm Debbie Harrison. I'm the Global Officer of Culture, and as part of Culture, sometimes we bring in wonderful guest speakers. And today we have two wonderful guest speakers. Margie Worrell has flown in all the way from Melbourne, Australia, where she grew up on a dairy farm and was the oldest sister of 7 children, and she has a great story to tell, and she just addressed a lot of us in the hub a few minutes ago. And she is an expert in, she's written some books, she's an author, she's an expert on leading change and on taking risks and not being risk averse, which we all need to learn how to do better. She is a life coach and works with leadership and with leaders to empower them. She has a new book called Stop Playing It Safe, and she has another book called Being Brave. Let me look at my notes here. She's worked with organizations including NASA, Accenture, Oracle, and the UN Foundation. She's interviewed global leaders. She told us she'd spent 5 days with Richard Branson, which I think would be really interesting to hear about. She is a mother of 4, which really makes her brave, and they're all teenagers right now. She has written for the Wall Street Journal. She's been on Al Jazeera, The Today Show, and is a commentator in Australia on Sunrise and ABC News Breakfast. So I'm really excited to have Margie here with us. And then she is interviewing somebody that I really don't need to introduce, Mr. Marriott, who's my father. And I would like to say something about how he leads with change. I think he's remarkable in that he's a constant learner. He's constantly learning, reading books. He's an expert on military history and World War II, if any of you share that interest. I've watched how he's led over the years, and he may not come up with all of the great ideas that this company has had, but he listens to all of them, he helps implement them, and he has the people's backs who have had those ideas. And I think that's the true mark of a true leader in leading change. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Marriott and Margie Worrell.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Well, it's a real thrill for me to be here with you today, Mr. Marriott, so thank you.
Thank you, Margie.
And I've got a few questions I'm going to be asking, and of course, being someone who is so passionate about helping people to live and lead with more courage, you're a great role model on that. And I know throughout your career had to take a lot of risks at times, and I just love to know more about maybe what one of the bigger risks you took was and how you found the courage to take the risk.
I think the biggest risk, and I've said this before, was developing the New York Marriott Marquis in Times Square. Back in 1981-82, John Portman, the architect, was authorized to build a hotel on a piece of land right on Times Square. He couldn't find the financing, he couldn't get it going, so he called me one day and he said, "Are you interested in that site?" And I said, yes, and I thought about it. I said, I had a friend who had a 200-room hotel in Times Square, and year-round he ran 90% occupancy. And I said to him one day, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because I get the Broadway shows on the weekends, and during the week," he said, "I get the transient businessman." And so that was about the extent of my knowledge of the area. I went up and looked at it. It was a seedy area. It was really bad. Hadn't been any new builds in Times Square in 30, 40 years. Some of the theaters were closing. And it was really a depressed area. And so then I said, well, let's hedge our bets. Let's put enough meeting space in that we can attract groups, because most of the hotels in New York were based on transient business and did not have good meeting space. So we expanded and we built the best meeting space we could build today. 35% of the business in that hotel is group business, and they'll do almost 200,000 group rooms this year. To make a long story short, we went ahead, we built the hotel. It was originally a 250 million hotel, and we ended up spending 500 million because of the construction workers and strikes and all the kinds of things that go on in New York. But today it's a very good hotel. It's making a lot of money. It's flourished. It's done well. But you know, I had the courage to build the hotel because I knew something about the market. I knew the hotel market in New York reasonably well, and I did my homework as best I could back then. And I just felt that Times Square was going to come back, and it did. Of course, that's the hot area of New York today. But you know, there's another thing I want to mention outside of this one big risk, and that's the Starwood acquisition.
Nobody's been talking about that.
It's only a $13 billion risk, you know. I mean, hello. And it wasn't my idea. And I was very comfortable with the way things were going. And now we're out there buying a very important company in our industry, and the security analysts say this will be if Marriott does it right, this can become the world's largest and most powerful hotel company. But the reason I made the decision not to oppose it and to go with it was because of the team, because of Arnie and the great team he's put together, who were so enthusiastic about doing this deal. And I could sense that they were going to commit themselves to it. They were going to make it happen. And so there was an area of comfort with this big bet that we were going to make it happen because of the commitment of the team and the excitement of the team and the energy of the team. And I knew every one of them well on the team, and I had great confidence in them. And so we really hedged our bets on this one by the great team we had in place to make it happen and pull it across. And it's going to be a lot of work going forward to pull it together. But when we do pull it together, it'll be a really powerful, powerful company.
Which really brings me to change and embracing change, because a lot of people struggle with change because it has its inherent uncertainty. It's all new ground that's being forged. How did you embrace, over the years, you've embraced a lot of change with spin-offs and mergers, acquisitions, all of those things. Given Starwood, and what do you think when you think about everybody here that's looking at all the change coming, just how to approach change?
We've always been a company of change. From the day the root beer stand started selling hot dogs, chili, and hot tamales and became a hot shop, a major change, right? What if they stayed with root beer and they got into the winter months in Washington where nobody drank root beer? They'd been out of business. My folks would have gone back to Utah. So they embraced change from their get-go. Then, they built the hot shop, and the people used to tell me years and years ago, I used to go to the hot shop every week to find out what was new on the menu, because there was so much change going on. And we ended up with a menu of 250 items on it that nobody could get out of the kitchen. But they continued to grow the business by adding food service opportunities to their business, with in-flight catering, with food service management, with all kinds of different food service opportunities, and then finally got into the hotel business. But managing change is a lot of fun. We were in 15 different businesses. And back then, Harold Janine, the head of ITT, was the #1 conglomerate, and he had 30 notebooks on the floor of his office, one for each of the companies that he owned. And the analysts were always asking me, what new business are you going to go into? And I would say, well, we're going to go into theme parks, we're going to go into cruise ships, we're going to go into all these things. And finally I woke up and said, hey, what are we doing in all these businesses? Let's change. Let's get into the lodging business. Let's put our emphasis on lodging. Of course, this was after my father passed away, because he wasn't about to bet the company on lodging. He was all a restaurant guy, and he liked these other businesses, but he was scared to death of the hotel business because of the debt. But we have constantly been a company of change. And somebody once said, if you're not changing and growing and learning, you'll never have an opportunity to celebrate. And I thought about that. We can't celebrate unless we are changing, unless we are growing, unless we are learning and doing better what we're doing. And so therefore, change is something that we've always embraced as a company. It's in our DNA, it's in our culture, and we will continue to change and do better with everything we do.
Yeah, I appreciate just saying you love change, it's fun. And I think so much of it is around that mindset you bring to it. It can be scary, or you can go, hey, let's see what we can do with this. And when I think about some of the attributes that you admire in leaders and you admire in leadership in general, what are some of those top attributes that you think the best leaders really embody well?
Well, I think listening is extremely important. The World Travel and Tourism Conference had a meeting in Dallas this past week, and we had a meeting with the executive committee, and George W. Bush, number 43, came and spoke to us. And they asked him, what was the most important thing a leader needs to go when he walks in the Oval Office? And the first thing out of his mouth was humility. And I thought, wow, that's quite a statement. And he said, yeah, because he said, you can't know everything. You can't do everything yourself. You have to rely on your team. You have to be willing to listen. And I've always told this story about Eisenhower when I was an ensign in the Navy and just come home from Christmas leave. And Eisenhower was down at our family farm with my parents and came down to shoot some quail. It was cold outside and nobody wanted to go out and shoot quail. And so we were standing around the fire and trying to decide, should we go outside, because we'd put about 50 quail out there in the field for him to shoot. And, he turned around and looked at me and he says, Bill, what do you want to do? What do you think we should do? And I said, wow, here's the commander-in-chief, the guy that won the war in Europe, asking me, an ensign in the Navy, what do I want to do? And I thought about that a lot. And I thought, that's how he won the war. That's how he brought along the big egos he had to deal with. Montgomery and the British Army, and Patton, the U.S. Army, and de Gaulle, a French guy, and all these characters he had to deal with by asking the questions and listening to what they had to say. He didn't always follow what they had to say, but he listened. And the key thing about listening is you get people to support you. If you are a good listener, they will always support you. We had an executive around here several years ago who wouldn't listen. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room, and pretty soon he was the only guy in the room because nobody really wanted to work for this guy. They'd come in with an idea, he'd dismiss it, and parade around and show off his ego, and pretty soon nobody would work for him, and the business started to fail. And so therefore he had to move on, but it was all a matter of not being willing to listen to his team. So he lost them.
So great listening, humility.
Humility is important.
Yeah. Confidence is something many people could look at you and go, well, you seem to have a lot of confidence, that you've always had confidence, that you've never struggled with confidence. How have you built your confidence over the years? And for those who sometimes people struggle to feel confident in the decisions they make and they're not sure about themselves and what to do, what have you learnt about confidence?
I've learned that I don't have as much as people think I have. You get confidence by doing and learning and making mistakes and fixing your mistakes, and by hedging your bets. If you're going to make a decision, what's the downside and how do I protect myself from the downside? When we built the Marquis in New York, I said we've got to hedge our bet. We've got to put in enough meeting space so that if things really don't work out here, I can do meetings business and probably run 70% occupancy. So you really have to know what you're doing. Do your homework. Be prepared. If you're prepared and you work hard, you'll be great. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think that's very important. And also recognize that success is never final. That's what I thought about on Starwood. We were a very, very comfortable company. We were cranking out billions of dollars a year in cash flow, buying a lot of stock back, and why disrupt that with this big acquisition, this integration that's going to have to take place? And I thought, because we were successful and we were resting on our laurels, success is never final. We had to take that leap. And so you have confidence if you know what you're doing, you've done your homework, and you really have studied the matter and deep dived in it. My father decided, I think, early on that I needed to build some self-confidence. And so the way he did it was by never answering a question. I'd go into him, I'd say, I've got this problem. And he'd ask me questions and say, well, have you looked at this, have you looked at that? And then he'd give me the advice he always gave me, which was no. You can't do this, you don't know what you're doing, this kind of stuff. And finally, one day, I went into him with a really serious problem. I thought it was serious. And I laid it out to him, and he just gave me the old answer again, no. And he saw I was visibly upset. And so he came into my office about a half an hour later, and he sat down across from me on his. He says, here are the 5 things you need to do, A, B, C, D, E. He knew exactly what the answers were, but he wouldn't give them to me. Because he said, you need to wrestle, he said in his own mind, you need to wrestle these problems to the ground, figure out what to do, otherwise you're never going to grow and learn. So it was a really interesting experience for me.
Yeah. So people, obviously, Marriott is about putting people first. You know, that's why you're here. What have you learned about the importance of having people feel that they're valued and an important part of the team and that whole ethos in the culture here?
Well, that's in our DNA, number one. You know, my dad and mother, when they founded the company, they said, we're going to take care of our people. This is a people business. We don't make widgets. We don't run assembly lines. We run personal contacts. All of our millions of contacts every year, every day, really, with all the rooms we've got out there and all the customers that are staying with us. We have to have people that feel good about their job. One of the key issues in developing a people culture is providing opportunity. And my dad, in the very early days, would pick kids off the street, bring them in, teach them how to cook, teach them how to be waitresses and waiters, and training, teaching, training, teaching. Training has always been part of this company, very important. These people love it. I ran into a guy in the elevator yesterday going up to back to my office from down here, and he said, I've been with you 2 weeks, and he said, I love the way the company embraced me, brought me in, helped me learn about the company. And he said, and we stopped on the first floor. He says, come on, get off, and I want a selfie with you. So we got off. Got off and did our selfie, and he let me go on back to my office.
That was very good of him to let you go on.
Yeah, it was nice of him to let me go on to the office. But so, you know, it's providing opportunity. When you think about it, I go to visit hotels, and I sit down with a general manager and his team, and the average general manager in our company of a hotel has been with us 25 years, and most of them started at the hourly level, probably 80-90%, which to me says we are providing opportunities. We're providing the teaching opportunities, the learning opportunities, the opportunity to really grow and develop. And that's what really we want to do. That's the great thing about Starwood. We're going to have an opportunity to provide growth opportunities for their people and our people as we pull these two companies together.
So when it comes to people too, not everything is work. People have lives outside work, and finding balance sometimes is hard, particularly when there's a lot going on. In terms of finding balance, I mean, you've travelled a lot, and obviously these days it's never just 9 to 5 isn't a simple thing the way it used to be. So how do you see balance, not over necessarily the course of a day or a week, but over the course of a lifetime?
You have to decide what you want to do with your life. And I decided that the family was most important, church was important, the business was important. And so I would, every time I was in Washington, every night I was in Washington, I came home for dinner at 6:30. And I brought a lot of work home with me, I'll have to admit. But we had dinner with the kids, and Donna and I did the dishes, and she did the cooking. And after dinner, I went back to work. So our son David was in the first grade, and they said, draw a picture of your father at work and at play. So he drew a picture of me sitting behind a desk with a necktie on, and that was at work. And then they said, well, what about at play? So I drew a picture of me at the desk without a necktie. So it's hard. It's really hard. And I so admire when we stand up there at Christmas time and shake hands with everybody coming to work in the early morning, to see you mothers And fathers sometimes come in with these strollers with 1 and 2 kids sometimes, and he must have got up at 4 in the morning to get down here from Frederick, get your little kids down here to daycare. And I really have such admiration for you because you're raising a family and at the same time you're building a career. It's hard, but you can do it. You can really do it.
Yeah. And I guess probably a final question to you is around not sweating the small stuff. Over the course of a life, you learn a lot about what's not worth worrying about, but sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's easy to get caught up with sweating the small stuff. And raising kids is a great example of where people can get wound up about little things that in hindsight don't matter. What have you learned about not sweating the small stuff?
Not a damn thing. I sweat everything.
It seems to be working.
What else do you want to talk about?
Debbie said, that would be a great question for you, Dad. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Well, if we're not talking about what's sweating the small stuff.
I have some questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, you've come a long way since you grew up on a farm in Australia.
I'm here.
Tell me how it shaped the person you are today.
Okay, well, I have traveled a long way, and I think growing up on a dairy farm, it's a very humbling place to grow up, and I think it earths you into what's important and what's not, and it gives perspective to everything else too. So I kind of look at life as a great adventure. Sitting here with you today, I go, look at the places life can take you when you kind of put your arms out wide to going, what's possible? You know, so I think it probably gave me deep roots and strong wings.
Good. That's great. Well, you're a speaker and an author. Why are you so passionate about your work?
Yeah. Well, I'm passionate about my work because I think as human beings we're capable of incredible things. And the biggest thing that I see holding people back from fulfilling their potential, like what they can be put on earth to create and to do, is their fear of failure, of their reputation being damaged, of being criticised, not belonging. And so the work I do is really helping them get past that. And I just look at an organisation like this, and everything great that's been accomplished has been by people with a big vision, been willing to take a risk, and to put things on the line that are more important than their pride.
Good. Great.
Yeah.
You work a lot with women in leadership.
Yeah.
Why do you feel so passionate about supporting them to live and lead more bravely?
Yeah, well, as a woman, and I know there's a lot of women here, and I just spoke previously to a big group of women, I think women, we tend to doubt ourselves more than men. I think we struggle a little bit more with confidence. In fact, there's a lot that shows women struggle more with confidence. So when it comes to being brave, I really believe that the big problems on the planet, the big problems we face politically and even in organisations, the diversity that women bring help make better decisions, like when there's more women involved. And so I really love to empower women to own their own value, because I think so often we don't see our own value, and to own our ability to affect change and to speak up. And I think everyone, including the men, are better off when we do that. And as women, I know when you're raising family and a lot of the traditional responsibilities are still left with women, that you see, juggling the kids and that, I know it can sometimes be a really hard juggling act, particularly if you're trying to have a career and take care of a family and be a good mum. So I think women sometimes just need a little bit extra support on that front.
Great. So I understand you're climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with your husband and your 4 kids.
Yeah.
Why in the world are you doing that?
Yeah. Because it's there. No, my husband turns 50 this year, and I said to him, what would you like to do for your 50th? He said, I think the most wonderful thing would be to go on a safari with my wife and 4 kids. And one of my sons said, safari's great, but we can see those animals at the zoo. Why don't we climb Mount Kilimanjaro and then go on a safari? So that's sort of, the seed was planted, and I have 4 teenagers. They're growing up so fast, and I'm so aware that they're spreading their own wings. And I just thought this would be an incredible thing to do as a family, and I know it's going to be really hard. So I just know we'll gripe about it probably the whole way up, and then we'll spend the rest of our life talking about the memories we created.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, why do you think so many people struggle with change and taking chances in their careers and in their lives?
Well, I think that, again, we are wired to want to protect what we have and be safe. You know, we're hardwired to avoid sometimes that feeling of vulnerability when we go into change, and it's something is new and it's unpredictable and it's uncertain, and I think that's why so often just we hold back and we worry about making a wrong decision, so we don't make a decision versus just going, make the best decision you can and figure it out. And I think that's why we've got to sometimes just go, let's just try it and see what we can do. And I think when people embrace that attitude and don't let their failures define them, you said a minute ago, success isn't final, but also failure isn't final.
Absolutely.
And I think so often when something doesn't go the way we want it to, we try something and it fails, we can take it so personally and go, therefore I'm a failure. And it's like, no, you tried it, you didn't get the result you wanted, learn what there is to learn, change plan, move forward.
Good.
And I think that is just so important to learn to be resilient in the face of our failure and setbacks, to learn the lessons, move on, and not to take it too personally.
It's terrific.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think Aussies are more adventuresome than anybody else?
Of course we are. You've all got to get out and travel more.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
It's been a
you.
lot of fun. So thanks. Come on.
Usually says it's time to go back to work. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.